A review about my sociality and friend group findings this year, from the simplest interaction to the biggest ones that I've had, is that within metaphor, I wouldn't read people as people to people interaction, but also in the way of breaking social fear and in a little sport metaphor. I think of interaction literally at that same time, but also as a game of thoughts, and it's also a game of sports from volleyball, football, baseball. In talking to people, you're not actually fighting against the team physically, but psychologically, there's that idea of a social fear. There's that idea of projections, and there's that idea of the fear that you have to overcome just to talk to that group. So you're not thinking of them, but you're not fighting against them either. But your fear is projected to them or what you're fighting against. Like, what if they judge me or do this, for example, on top of actually having to hold conversations? In any sport, baseball, volleyball, or football, one is not playing against the other friend group, for example, but rather their own fear. The fear is the opposing team and whatever projections that they have or we have upon each other, on top of what the group could also be thinking of. I can't open these metaphors opening it from baseball, volleyball, softball, because that's going to take too much time. So I'll keep it to baseball here. Think of it as that whenever you enter a new friend group, you're entering their field of play. We're all playing the same thing. It's just talking, obviously, but the catch is when you're new, we don't know how their rules are. They don't know how your rules are. It's system thinking. This is not person to person jest, but as rulebooks to rulebooks on how ideal ways of life are expected and completely interpreted. And the idea is that how can one successfully join without violating anything? And if friendship making is mostly easy, but beliefs differ, that's where it gets ugly, but that's where it makes it worth because that's where one learns. But that turns a simple social task for newcomers into a game where technically, yes, the friend group is the opposing team only if they hold unended suspicion or believe something that is actually false. But the opposing team is primarily natural environment and the fear that's shown by that environment. For example, if you want to talk to someone in a room that's small versus one that's in a mall. Imagine there's three bases. The first one is your base that you run to after a home run. That is the narrative base. For me, I call it that one, but you can call it whatever you want. The second base is whatever the group thinks, and whatever the group thinks of you, of what you're trying to do. The third base is just there to name. But whenever we interact, for example, we're on the offensive when we're trying to say something, trying to give out a good pitch for the group and hope to connect and maybe find a way. But in metaphor, like for most of this year, for most of the groups we visited, we came as a visiting baseball team. So we're not accepted to play for their team or join their team, for example, but because either many groups are closed off or moved around too much without telling other people around them. And for some, even though I did manage to break a few key social fears and did hit a few good runs, even though it was mostly temporary in their group, I just say that some foul hits did actually disqualify all the teams from the play game because there's rulebook differences, as I said. That rewrites everything because that turns a social game of social hierarchy into a how can I bat against not the people themselves, but my own fears that I project and what they project onto us. Is that how can I be more effective in speaking and also differentiate from a group that wants to talk versus one that is, well, just being inactive, for example. And in metaphor, if sociality was a league like the NFL or the MLB, then what I did is that when Layla and Noelia, when I successfully joined their group, that means we hit a home run in this metaphor. I did, even though I still got to stay and I enjoyed quite a bit of things that we both had for each other. So in the major leagues of life, it represents the first time that I've actually managed to join people who I don't know and turn them into people that we know today. And in football terms, they award us our first touchdown. And in emotional terms, they handed us feedback of that we are actually capable. And also in baseball terms, yes, they awarded our first 1-0 score against the opposing social fear that we have, and obviously what we've been thinking. We got to second base because that's second base represents what the group thinks and what we think, and we're able to take that before the social fear could end up stealing that base. This is a social hierarchy that I am scared of joining. This is a social group into a this is a baseball field where we all play the same exact game. But first we must score against our own fears and actually find base and eventually find this big world of sociality. We hit that very first home run right there, 1-0. Although we lost a few other games against other groups or that simply didn't participate or misinterpreted. I mean, that means right now we're off season. This is already summer break. One day when I finally get back into high school and finally find a friend group that sticks, I won't have to play baseball metaphorically because I've entered a natural state once I actually integrate into a group. But yes, real life, guys, people are not baseball games just to ground this up like a ground ball. And I will not think like this all the time. And you do not play against a hierarchy, but the metaphor holds up. Is that like a good pitch and a good bat? You need to know how to be a good person in conversation and to know how to be a good listener. Social expectations will differ just as much as rulebooks do across all the major leagues. That means not all people's belief systems operate exactly under the same way. So umpires will always call. But I think whenever one enters a new place, you're still a participant of the same game, but of different rules. And that goal is to find a place where both of these rulebooks can exist peacefully in this metaphor.